Hi everybody, I'm Tim Anderson. I'm the executive chef and owner of Nanban and author of Nanban the Cookbook. It's a restaurant in Brixton. We do what's called Japanese soul food. And today we're gonna make a Japanese soul food classic, Katsu Sando, Tonkatsu sandwiches. So a Katsu Sando has to have a lot of texture. It's obviously got the crispy, juicy breaded pork and the lovely soft white bread, but then I always like to have a lot of fresh crunch from cabbage. So this is a hispy or sweetheart cabbage. If you can get the flat round cabbage that you sometimes see in Asian supermarkets, that's even better, but this is really good, really sweet. And we want to slice this as thinly as you can. If you got a mandolin at home, you can use that. Otherwise, just a nice sharp knife. If you're really lazy or you have to prepare a lot of Katsu Sandos, you can also run this through a food processor with a slicing attachment. And actually you can use kind of whatever cabbage you like. I like hispy because it's so sweet and fresh. Red cabbage is fine too. Not traditional, but really nice, really peppery. All right, that's our cabbage done. All right, so we've got our cabbage sliced up, ready to go. Now, obviously, we have to turn to the pork itself. So there's a lot of different cuts actually that work for this, but I really like loin. It's a really sort of good balance of fat and lean meat. It's tender enough that you can bite right through it in the sandwich, and it's the perfect size as well. It fits within slices of bread just about perfectly. Now, ordinarily when I'm making tonkatsu, I like a nice big, thick pork chop because that way it stays a bit pink and juicy in the middle actually. But with a sandwich, you want to get something a little bit thinner. Now, if you've ever made schnitzel before, they always tell you to bash out the pork, make it really, really thin, or if it's chicken, to butterfly it and then bash it out. But I think that almost always just results in overcooked, dry pork. I never understood why they do that. So these are about right. These are just over sort of 1.5 centimeters thick, which is thick enough that they'll be easy to cook through, but not so thin that they will dry out. So these are perfect. Now we're gonna season these well with salt, and white pepper, and also this is meat tenderizer powder. Obviously, because you want to be able to bite through the pork in the sandwich, you don't want to have to chew or struggle with it at all. It has to be as tender as possible. I tried different marinades to achieve this, but what I didn't like is that the marinades tended to impart too much flavor. I really just wanted this to taste like pork. So a friend of mine recommended this. It's derived from papaya, has an enzyme in it called papain, which is the same thing you get in kiwi fruit or pineapple, which sometimes makes your tongue go tingly. That's actually the tenderizer effect happening on your tongue. So it actually starts to break down the meat, and it works really, really well. It's very effective and doesn't impart any other flavor. You should use it very sparingly because actually if you use too much, it can make the meat kind of mushy, kind of too soft actually. We'll just sprinkle that on like you would salt on both sides. Okay, so these are nice and seasoned. We want to put these in the fridge for about an hour for that tenderizer to work its magic on these. All right, so we've got our pork, which has been in the fridge tenderizing for about an hour. And now we're going to move on to the next step, which is to panade, to breadcrumb the tonkatsu. So tonkatsu sandwiches, katsu sando, they're always delicious because it's deep fried pork in a sandwich, so what's not to like? But there are a few tricks, a few little things you can do to make it amazing, not just really good. Obviously the meat tenderizer powder is one of those little tricks. Good quality pork is important as well, but then how you breadcrumb and a few things that go into that is also going to make a really amazing katsu sando. So we're going to move on to that now. I'm going to start by beating a couple of eggs. And to these, we're gonna add a little bit of vegetable oil. The oil is obviously water impermeable. So when you mix this into the eggs, it creates a kind of barrier around the pork and kind of seals in the water and the juice from the pork itself. It won't evaporate off as much, which does two things. First, it keeps the meat juicier, and secondly, it keeps the water from seeping out into the breadcrumb after it's cooked, so the breadcrumb itself stays crunchier. All right, nice and smooth. Then what you need is some flour. So I found for some reason, there's a food science question that's beyond me. Strong white bread flour works best in a Katsu Sando. It is a better adhesive somehow. And also, I feel like it helps with the crunch a bit, something about the gluten in it. And then finally, we have panko. Panko breadcrumbs, Japanese-style breadcrumbs, more like shavings of bread than actual bits of bread. And we just do egg, flour, breadcrumbs. When you're panning also, it's a good idea to have one wet hand, which you're using to deal with the eggs, and then one dry. So nice and well coated into the flour. Back into the egg again. And that double dipping in the egg forms a really nice kind of glue. All right, so just gonna pat that in. As you're putting the panko on the chops, you can actually kind of press it down and flatten it out a bit. Make it nice and wide so it fills the bread when we make the sandwiches. All right, so that's all panade. They already look good, actually. And you can make these ahead of time, by the way. These will be fine in the fridge for up to a day, actually. So you can make them the day before, and then all you have to do is drop them in oil to fry them, which is what we're gonna do next. Okay, so we've got our lovely pork chops all coated in crunchy panko. Now it's time to deep fry. So, safety first with deep frying, you wanna use a big pot where the sides come up several inches above the surface of the oil, so in case it does bubble up, it doesn't overflow. Especially with a gas hob with an open flame, that's a big fire risk. So use a big pot for your deep frying. Use a neutral vegetable oil with a high smoke point. This is sunflower, but rapeseed is good too, or peanut. And you want to get the oil to 180 degrees for these chops. So buy a thermometer if you don't have one. Every kitchen should have a thermometer. They're very, very useful, especially for things like meat cookery, for example. But in the case of deep frying, just a normal jam thermometer will do. So this is at about 190, which is fine for these chops. But if your chops are thicker, you want to use a lower temperature. So around 160, 170 is sort of a good safe temperature for most pork chops, because you want it to form that lovely rich golden brown crust at the same time that it cooks through. A little bit of pink in the pork is fine, but you don't really want rare pork. I mean, I don't mind it, but it puts a lot of people off. And also it's a bit chewier that way. And of course, you want this to be nice and as tender and soft as possible in the sandwich form. So 180 will do for us. So we'll lay the chops in the hot oil. And because these aren't that big, they'll only cook for about 5 or 6 minutes. All right, so these chops are looking beautiful and golden brown. Look at that. Oh my God. So they're ready to come out. So drain them well. You can use a rack or just paper towel on a tray. And just like any meat, you want to let them rest a bit before you cut into them or bite into them. And what that does is, as the meat cools, it sort of evens out the cooking, and it also makes the liquid inside less volatile, so it doesn't come gushing out when you cut into it. So it keeps the juices in the meat, basically. So let those rest for about 5 minutes, and then we can construct our sandwiches. Okay, so we've got everything we need now to make an awesome Katsu Sando. We've got our katsu, so we're just gonna put it in a sando. Got our cabbage as well, and a few special condiments. So it's not really a Tonkatsu Sando without Tonkatsu sauce. So katsu sauce is kind of like a Japanese brown sauce. You can buy it at any Asian supermarket. Some big supermarkets, normal supermarkets have it these days. You can make it yourself as well, but it's kind of like making your own ketchup. Like, it's kind of a faff, and it's not going to be as good as the store-bought stuff. So you should just buy some Tonkatsu sauce. Really, really lovely, and sort of an essential flavor in a Tonkatsu sandwich. We also have Kewpie Mayo. Kewpie Mayo is a Japanese brand of mayonnaise. It's very highly seasoned. It uses malt vinegar and whole egg yolks. So it's a richer, slightly sweeter flavored mayonnaise, really delicious. You can also, by the way, kind of make your own Kewpie Mayo at home. There are recipes online, but you can also buy this just about anywhere these days as well. So you may as well get some, it's delicious. So, Supermarket white bread. This is the standard Katsu Sando bread. I think it's really important to have this kind of bread for Katsu Sando. You can use really whatever bread you like though, but I think that the texture and the flavor of this is sort of nostalgic for me with these sandwiches. You don't want to get the cheapest white bread you can find because it's too flimsy. It'll sort of fall apart and squish down to become too thin. So you gotta get something that's got some substance to it. All right, so bread, Kewpie Mayo on one side. Be generous with it. Then a lot of cabbage. Then katsu sauce, straight on the cabbage. The cabbage basically will help to catch that sauce so it doesn't get too onto the bread, which will make the bread really soft. Then our lovely tonkatsu. Little bit more sauce on there, just in a big ring. Little bit more cabbage as well. Other piece of bread. Give it a good squish, and then we slice and enjoy. Oh yes. Look at that. Lovely, juicy, delicious pork katsu sando, full of cabbage, full of sauce, full of Kewpie Mayo, on delicious soft white bread. And it's simple and it's quick. There's really nothing stopping you from making this right now.